What was it like for you? And everyone knows what your promos were like, especially when you were young and rambunctious in the 80s. But what was it like for you doing that promo, that kind of promo, in a house like that, in the Sam Houston Coliseum? You said 12,000 seats versus a studio. What is it like with that ambiance of all of that? I mean, the crowd's all around you. They're making noise much more than they would in a studio.
Right.
What's it like doing that kind of promo in a big house?
Well, but actually think about it. The noise level is relative because in the TV studio with the great acoustics meant for doing the 6 o'clock news, you put 100 people in there, 40 of them are kids and they're screaming. It's still so loud you can hardly hear. It's a much smaller space. Then you've just magnified it, fucking 1,200 times or whatever. But for me, the that was the first time the Houston shows, because that was during the Mid South year, that I got a chance to do live interviews in front of the house show crowd. Because remember, well, most people may not remember by now. On a regular house show from any territory in the 70s and really 80s, much less before that, how many wrestlers on the card might talk on the house mic? Two?
Oh, maybe. I've seen
Maybe?
shows where there was no one on the house mic.
Was no one a lot, but maybe two, maybe. If that was a thing that happened that night. You didn't do interviews because it was like a fight card. Here come the fighters and they ring the bell and they did all of their business, the wrestlers did, through their physicality. And every once in a while, when a card had to be changed or somebody was injured or some angle had to be furthered, then a guy would take the house microphone and, well, I'm being screwed around or that's not fair, whatever. So when I was obviously in the Tennessee territory in Memphis, Lawler and Handsome Jimmy and then Austin Idol, that was part of their fucking deal. And so they started using the microphone at the house shows a little bit earlier. So I had the concept, right? But I had never, I'm trying to think of a time in the Memphis territory past like spot shows where we'd make some bullshit challenge to kill some time, right? Whatever. I don't think I ever got on the microphone in Memphis, in the Coliseum, or even in Louisville. I was on the microphone in Louisville more when I was the ring announcer than I was when I was a manager.
But even like Lawler, we think of him, especially like the 90s when he, figured it out. Like, I don't have to take any bumps and I can go do these dates. It was him on the microphone. Like him, the Andy Kaufman thing, he gets out there and gets on the mic just to set it up. But when he was a heel in the 70s, how often was he on the mic at the arena shows?
Almost none. Almost none. In the early 70s, it just wasn't done and it wasn't needed, and he would probably caused a fucking riot. And as he became the top guy in the late 70s, early 80s, he was on the microphone more as a baby face. Again, sometimes to kill time, sometimes to advance an angle or explain something that was going to go on, or say, hey, if you're going to have that guy out here, I'm bringing, hey, superstar, Bill Dundee, come on, or something like that. These weren't even long promos. Long promos weren't done at house shows at all by anybody, except maybe every once in a while. And did they do it in the Garden when they announced the next month's card or whatever?
That's not even a promo. That was just Howard Finkel saying names and getting a pop.
I mean, did they bring anybody out to say, I'm going to be there or whatever? I don't even think they did that. So that's the thing is, again, the generation that grew up watching the late 80s, early 90s into Attitude Era, more television-centric wrestling when the networks got involved and there was more talk and more of these soliloquies, that they have come to think that's part of wrestling also, but no, that wasn't a thing. So where were we going with it? Oh, so the promos. But in Houston, you got a chance to do a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B because they were shooting, even though at that time Houston used the Mid-South television program, the time slot in Houston was 90 minutes. Mid-South was only 60. Paul Bosch customized that program with 30 minutes of footage from the Sam Houston Coliseum and promos hosted by him, shot in Houston specifically for the next card in Houston. And that's why it was one of the top drawing towns in the country. And you could get out there and not only do the TV promos, but you would have in the audience the most likely customers that were going to buy a ticket to the matches in 2 weeks from tonight, the next card, because they're already there. And you're doing the matches with the finishes that are going to lead to the next card that we're talking about. So, yeah, so we're pitching those people live. And, of course, I mean, you no good gum-bumping sacks of snake feces and call them every name in the book and make them as mad as possible. And what we're going to do to your heroes, you better show up and see it. It was fucking great. And the people, you could feel the people actually hate your fucking guts it raised the temperature in the room when you started talking.
What's the difference, you think, in terms of doing it when you have the fans behind you as opposed to, a curtain or whatever it may be, a wall, but, let's say a curtain and a little couple steps up. What's the difference between having that behind you and having the fans behind you in terms of the way you do it? Anything affect you?
Well, see, here you had both, because the way the Coliseum was, behind you had the curtains, right? But then the curtains only went so high above this stage. And then if it was a big crowd, and especially if security couldn't fucking keep them away, they would try to go around behind you and try to chuck shit over that fucking curtain from the upper part of the cheap seats. Because there were still people behind you. They were just a ways back there. So they were all around. I mean, that's another reason why I was always, if you watch me on those promos, I'm always keeping an eye out, because there's people on the floor. There's people that can get a good, clear fucking shot at you with a slingshot or whatever from the side of the general admission seats. And then they're just lobbing shit blind from the cheap seats at the far end in the back. So they were all around in various places.
How did that compare to doing them in Fort Worth?
Fort Worth was... that was in the ring. So at least you had a clearer shot of shit coming, because you didn't have those lights right in your eyes on the stage, and you had a little bit more room that you could see, and they weren't right at your feet. But then again, an in-ring promo, you can use the energy from everybody in the building. And even though, I wouldn't ignore the people opposite the hard camera side, I would turn and acknowledge them at some points, but obviously we're doing television, we're working for the hard camera. But that way you had a little bit more control of the room, you felt like, because you were in the middle of the room in what was the primary location of lighting, and you've still got your announcer in there with the microphone, but it's more like now you're in command of the whole room. Whereas in the interview setup in Houston over there at the end, you're in the middle of them, all right, but the ring is still in the middle of the building. You're over here on the end with these fucking lights shining in your eyes. But everybody could see you in the building. You just couldn't see them.
They had those little sets, though, in Fort Worth, didn't they? I remember you with a backdrop behind you.
You know where that was? That was the Will Rogers Coliseum is like literally, it's on the fairgrounds, and it's a stock, livestock is the word I'm searching for, kind of show building. And what that was they had a little background that was right to the right of where you went through that. Remember when Crippler Rip Oliver slammed Mike Von Erich's hand in the door?
Yeah.
It was a door to a cattle chute. That was where we went into the fucking locker rooms. You go to the cattle chute and turn right was the locker rooms. And right to the side of that was a set that they had that Mark Lawrence would stand in front of. But a lot of times, most of the time, especially after the first little while that we were there, they let us do them live in the ring with Mark Lawrence holding the microphone. And I liked those better because, again, over there, you couldn't command everybody's attention. You're over there next to the door to the fucking cattle chute.
But like looking at like the 1980s NWA, and everyone loves those TV shows mostly for the promos. Maybe the Midnight Express matches, but there's some real stinkers on there too. But it's the promos.
Yeah.
And
that was a little bitty set over off the side of the announce desk.
But you look at you guys, well, you look at Jim Cornette, You look at Ric Flair, you look at Dusty Rhodes, Road Warriors, Arn. It was different not having people behind you and not having to scream and being able to look into the camera and deliver stuff. It was different than it is the way they do it backstage now, whether it's Renee or whoever holding a microphone, or in WWE where everyone stands at a weird angle, addresses people in a weird way and watches TV, like they're back to the TV, all that kind of stuff.
Well, but see, the ones on Crockett's syndicated TV, these were like these high school and college gyms that seated 2,000 people in very close proximity to Charlotte, somewhere within 100 miles north in South Carolina. That's where they would take the TV truck and park it, and we'd roll tape and do 2 one-hour shows and a fucking dark match and be out of there between 7:30 and 10 o'clock. And those buildings were so packed with people, and a lot of those interviews weren't even on the PA system, because
I was going to ask you that before when we were talking Fort Worth. Yeah,
the ones for Crockett, because those little gyms and the setup we had, they had an announcer, ring announcer PA, but all those promos weren't always on the PA system, because it would just, you would stop by the desk and scream into Bob Caudle and David Crockett's mic, or Tony Schiavone and David Crockett, or whatever. Or we would be on the set, and for whatever reason, they couldn't feed it through. But sometimes it didn't matter, because if they were over the PA, the people were screaming so loud, either screaming, "We love you" for the Rock and Roll Express or Magnum or Dusty, or screaming, "We'll kill you" for us or the Horsemen, that you couldn't hear them in those buildings anyway. And it wasn't like we had these goddamn giant, they had a traveling fucking PA system for the gyms that didn't have one at all. And it's not like it sounded like the Who in concert, right?
Right.
So, and the thing is, those buildings were so small that when you were over on the interview set, which was generally placed right next to the entrance to wherever the locker rooms were going to be, most of the people in the building couldn't see you over there. You had a couple of light stands, once again, in between you and the rest of the crowd. And it was over in the corner of the building next to where the announcers were positioned, down the aisle from the ring. And the biggest deal was, the buildings were so full of people, they had to put the interview set right in front of the locker room door, wherever we were, and build out from that, because that was the only way to get the guys out and to the set where they could do their interviews without the fans either loving on us or hating on us to the point where we couldn't get there, and it fucked up the taping. So that was, they had to determine where to put the fucking interview set based on how could we get them without taking them through any of the people. The whole building's fucking full.
But my question before, and I apologize for background noise, it's either the...
you got more gardeners that we're never going to hear about, huh?
Well, it's either that or the cleaning person upstairs, so I'm not sure, and I don't know where the noise is coming from.
Have you not let her go home yet? It's been 3 weeks.
She was supposed to start on the other side of the house. I'm not sure if that's what it is, but my question was going to be...
You should send out Lewis and Clark for an expedition for the last one that went to the other side of the house. That's been 2 years. She hadn't come back yet.
Again, you can't replicate the TBS studio on Techwood Drive, but there is something to be said about, look at some of the guys there. Look at a CM Punk, for instance, who's a strong promo, and him being able to deliver something into a camera directly. So he's talking to the people at home, but you get that reaction in the room.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not saying you could do a Memphis studio or something like this that's that small, but there has to be a way, because and CM Punk was pretty good about it. From what I remember his last run, he made them hold a microphone every time he did a promo.
Yes.
But no one else does that. Everyone else just grabs the mic and does a speech while they wander around in the ring. I would like to see that change. Yeah, that's something upstairs. What the hell's going on here? That's what I had to say.
Well, and I agree with you. And the point is, all of these things could be at least considered for some type of different look to a program that wouldn't offend the primary fans of the genre that you're trying to, compete in. And again, I know that for the people that like that kind of thing, it's the kind of thing those people like, and that can be said about everybody, and for one thing or another. But you see on the YouTube comments or the Twitter comments of numerous of the various wrestling websites and channels, there is a disagreement. A lot of people are offended by the namby-pamby, flippy, lollipop guild version of their soft pussy video game wrestling that used to like old wrestling where people actually tried to make you believe that they were going to fucking beat each other up for real. And those things cannot coexist with each other because the fan base of each thing is offended by the other thing. And I'll say this and I'll quit. In summation, I think it's safe to say from the numbers that we have seen in various places and various companies over the past 20 or 25 years, there's a lot more people that liked it when they actually tried to beat each other up than there is now. So we outnumber you. Give us a fucking program that we would like. Let's see what happens.
Well, we will see what happens. Perhaps you get that program. Perhaps you tune in and you hear Excalibur's voice and you think, I gotta sue.
Boy, and I'll tell you what. There is nothing new about wanting to sue Excalibur, who has a sock on his head and it sounds and looks like poo, too. But I'll tell you who, if you want to sue, that you could call and say, who are you? Stephen P. New.
Was that okay? That was it?
Oh,
okay.
that was where you put the music in.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Your clients are ruining me.
People that should be in a zoo. That's what I was looking for. I was on the ooh train and I was doing good, and then suddenly I stumbled coming down the hill. But if you're a person who's being ruined by clients of Stephen P. New, don't call him. But if you have been ruined by someone else, and or harmed, and or wrongfully terminated, and or, in other words, inconvenienced, then you do need to call Stephen P. New at newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, to make sure that your rights and freedoms are stood up for and championed in a court of law, advocated for. Even Stephen P. New is the foremost advocate, not involving Paul Heyman, by the way. He doesn't have a trademark on that thing. Stephen P. New is the foremost advocate for the wrestling fans and people in and around the wrestling industry. He will stand up for your rights and fight for what is right and just, and he won't basically jack you around like Heyman does when he calls it. Paul Heyman is giving an advocate a bad name these days. Let Stephen P. New advocate for you in the right way.
That's right, Stephen P. New.
What is your vocation that would need to be advocated?
My vocation that would need to be advocated?
If whatever vocation you've got, he will advocate for it.
Is Jewish Superman a vocation?
Jewish Superman. Well, Muhammad Ali was the black Superman. Remember? Muhammad Ali. He floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee. Muhammad, the black Superman. I can't remember the rest of the line.
You snapping your fingers?
Yes, I'm snapping my fingers to the beat there because I'm rocking along.
To the beat.
Ali, catch him if you can. That was a top 40 song. Are you kidding? The Ballad of Muhammad Ali? It was a big deal in Louisville back in the late 60s.
I know about it. I just didn't know the lyrics.
Yeah. You could be the Jewish Superman, and whatever your vocation out there, folks. If you need somebody to vocate for your vocation, let Stephen P. New be your advocate. Newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084.
That is right. All right, Jim. Well, let's get one more question and get out of here. And I'm sure we'll catch up with things on the experience. We'll get more questions on next week's show, hopefully.
Oh, yeah, we are going to save our comments on the rest of the lackluster AEW television program for the experience, and also start talking about all these big events this Memorial Day weekend. Other people are going to be out grilling and broiling, and we're going to be sitting here talking and toiling.